Welcome everyone to the Licensing Committee Tuesday 9th of March 2021, and this is via Microsoft Teams. It's a virtual meeting. I would remind all participants that any member of the press and public may be listening into the proceedings, so please do follow your guidelines for virtual meetings. Do we have any apologies for absence or notification of substitutes, Michelle?
We've had apologies from James Clayton and Hugh Gregor.
Thank you.
And no substitutions.
Thank you. And could I ask if there's any declaration of disclosable pecuniary interest?
I've not received any information on that.
I'll take that as a no. Thank you very much. So I will now hand over to our chair, Councillor Payne. Thank you, Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Sarah. Yes. Michelle, would you like to carry out the roll call of the members present?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Councillor Payne?
Yes, present.
Councillor Cherry?
Present.
We've had apologies from Councillor Clayton. Councillor Cole?
Present.
Councillor Crockford-Hawley?
Present.
Councillor Gregor, we've had apologies from Councillor Gregor. Councillor Harley?
Present.
Councillor Holland?
Present.
Councillor McQuillan?
Present.
Councillor Parker? Councillor Pepperell?
Present.
Councillor Solomon?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Tonkin?
Present.
And Councillor Willis?
Present.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Now, if we move on to the minutes of the last meeting of the 3rd of November. Has anybody got any questions about the accuracy of the minutes? I assume we can accept the minutes then? Thank you. The next item is matters referred by elsewhere, which I believe there are none. So then we move on to item 6, which is the end of year report on administration and enforcement of all licensing regimes. Now, the licensing team have been under pressure. It's a pretty small team which is under resourced really, and they've been very busy with the continual changes onto the COVID regulations and as well as dealing with the changes to licensing legislation. So we have the end of year report, and we need to consider the changes to the taxi policy in line with the statutory guidance from the Department for Transport. So Sue, would you like to introduce the report?
Thank you, Councillor Payne. Morning, everyone. I'm sure everyone knows who I am, Sue Isherwood. I manage the licensing service for the council. And just invite you today to have a look through a summary of some of the main activities that we've carried out for the licensing team this financial year, and to highlight some of the ongoing pressures and difficulties that we've experienced, as Councillor Payne just alluded to, through the coronavirus pandemic. In relation to policies, as you know, we've got various statutory and local policies that guide the council in their responsibilities for legislation. The Licensing Act 2003 policy, that does get renewed every 3 to 5 years. It's due to be renewed at the end of last year. Now, the Home Office came back to us to say that they understand the pressures that teams have been under nationally, and that they're happy for us to delay the start in that formal consultation until this year. What we did, I did meet with Councillor Payne earlier on in the year and said there are such big changes at the moment going on with the nighttime economy, the hospitality sector. None of us really know what it's going to look like by the time everything is out of the other end of restrictions. So I think it's probably prudent if we look to assess where we are as things reopen over the summer months, get some idea of where we're headed, what we're looking to achieve with our licensing policy, and then come back in the autumn with a draft of proposals based on what we've learned throughout that reopening period. I do think also we need to perhaps take a little bit more of an aspirational approach. I'm conscious that policies have developed and I've taken them over as policies in place. And we've been very careful to say what we're not looking to accept, what we won't have, what we will enforce against. But I do feel that it's perhaps time for us to put something a bit more aspirational about what we would like our town centres and nighttime economies to look like, and perhaps put some encouraging messages in there as to what new applicants might look to achieve, and gradually evolve things as we go forward. So if you're all happy with that approach, my colleagues and I will do some data research over the summer as things progress. We'll ask for your input if you've got anything in your local area that is an issue to you particularly or a concern. Feel free to drop us a line or contact any of the officers, and we'll build that into the sort of evolution of the policy as we're going forward. So I presume we're okay with that approach over the summer. Thank you all. The sexual entertainment venues policy, that one has been with us for quite a while. We did suggest at the sort of interim review in March that we might look to review that one as well. To be honest, the resource that we've got available to us at the moment is prohibitive on that front. We've risk assessed that. We've got one premise that's been entirely closed since this time last year through legal restriction. We're helping them currently to sort of get their licence back in place and get them to be able to reopen. But we do feel that the policy is fit for purpose. We've not had any complaints about our one premise. So I think we've risk assessed that we will put that policy review on hold until we're able to sort of resource it properly. So hopefully you'll all be comfortable with that approach as well. Taxi and private hire policy. This is the one that we have put some input into over the last few months. The Department of Transport statutory standards that came out earlier in the year, end of last year rather, we did go through quite in depth at the last interim review, so I don't propose to go through those in any great detail unless anyone's got any particular issues that they want me to try and answer for you. I'll do my best. And we did sort of reassure ourselves at that point that most of the proposed standards were already in place in our current policy. So we were safe to try and review that over the winter in the midst of a pandemic, but try and get that policy up and running for this year to start us as we start opening again for new applications. I did put a copy of the statutory standards attached as a separate index appendix in your papers if you need to refer to that, and there's an online link as well. What I've done with the actual policy, normally I would do a tracked version of a policy amendment, but in this instant we're not looking to review the current content as it is. There are a few minor amendments to numbering and pages, but rather than confuse you, I thought it was easier just to put what we're planning to add to the policy at this stage in highlighted red in your documents, just so that you can see what we've added to the policy. I don't think I need to go through absolutely all of the policy. You've all had a copy as part of the papers. Obviously, I'm happy to answer any questions. But I think I really just wanted to sort of draw your attention to the main points, just so that we know that we're happy with what we've got. We're looking as a start date. I haven't specified that in the policy, but we're now trialling our first online applications under the new process to get new grants up and running. So what I would propose for this, if we're in agreement, is to start the new policy from April the 1st, so that all new applicants that are coming in will be subject to the new policy. But the DBS updates, where we are going to have such an influx to administer, I think we will have to phase that in for our existing checked already applicants, as we are able to accommodate that within resource or the outsourcing of the service. So it'll be like a two-stage process, but I'm conscious that any new applicants should go through the new revised policy as soon as we can possibly accommodate that. So that would be my proposal for a start date. The main changes are in relation to criminal record checks, as we just said. Previously, we would always refer contentious applications through our criminal convictions policy and through to yourselves if there was any issues. But this has identified really that we could probably do with strengthening our convictions policy. Where is our starting point? What will we accept from a new applicant? We will also have to review any of the new licenses we currently have, But I think in light of the fact that if they were contentious, they came to you in the first place, I think we should be able to accommodate an administrative review when we get new DBS updates for those existing applicants. So I don't foresee that being a particular challenge for either us or for you in terms of hearings. We'll just have to treat each case on its merits and see how we get on with that. Fit and proper test wise, she says, look into a bit further on. I think it's really useful to remind ourselves that if we start every application with the comment in there that without any prejudice, based on the information before us, would we allow a person that we care for, regardless of condition, to travel alone in a vehicle with this person any time of day or night? And if on the balance of probabilities the answer is no, we don't give them a licence. And I think that would be my main message for the policy review, is that's our starting point. If they shouldn't be given the benefit of doubt in a civil proceeding, and it's only a 50-50, should they or shouldn't they, then we should be saying really that they shouldn't hold a licence with us. And the new policy's got bits to cover that within it. We will insist on enhanced certificates, including barred list checks, so that we make sure we check absolutely everything we can. We've integrated extra bits in there about self-reporting of licensees to try and get them to come back to us as quickly as they can with those. And I think the other area of change mainly will be to do with vehicle operators. Traditionally, they've had minimal DBS high level checks. We've not really checked into who their staff are, what their record keeping is like. We've done the basic checks with them, but that is an area that will become more relevant in this policy, where we'll be checking people like the dispatch staff, the booking staff, just to make sure that where those vehicles are being directed are not part of a bigger criminality than the driver would be aware of. So the onus will be on operators to keep a register of those and react a bit better to those sort of situations. Don't think there was anything much more on there that we haven't already gone through, but if anybody has got anything in particular on the policy that you're not happy with or need some clarification on, I'm happy to talk through that for you if that will help.
Sue, just a quick question. Are you going down the route that James Button would advocate, that any convictions, no licence? Or are you saying you're coming down harder on somebody now with convictions?
Sorry, Chairman, I can hear nothing.
Sorry, my microphone started to play up. Did you hear that, Sue?
Yes, I did, yeah. I think alluding to
that,
the appendix. Oh, okay, thank you. Appendix L of the policy is the criminal convictions policy. We did accept drivers previously with a level of previous conviction, but I think I would agree with what you're saying. We're actually now being harder on that admission level, right. A longer period since previous conviction. Some of them will prohibit them from having a licence at all, whereas before we would have looked at it on its merits and assessed it. So yes, we have taken the hardest line out of the standards that I think we probably could have taken. And I personally don't think you can sort of spare that with public safety in mind.
No, I agree. And the difference between the basic and the enhanced DBS, is this going to be relevant?
It will be relevant in so much as the introduction of a basic check for operating staff, dispatch staff. Hopefully, in a way, it will be a deterrent, because if there are things that are going to come up on a basic DBS, that may be a deterrent from them working in that in the first place. Okay. But for vehicle operators, we'll go to the next stage up. So there'll be a standard check done, which will encompass another element of criminality. And then for drivers, we would insist on the fully enhanced plus barring list to pick up anything that's even sort of chief of police officer information in addition to convictions.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Come in. Can
Okay.
you remind me how often the taxi drivers have to come up
Hang
for
on
renewal
a
of
sec.
license?
Hang on a moment. I've got a number of speakers who want to ask questions. I'll just take them in order, if I may. The first one is Councillor McQuillan.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very quick question, and thank you for presenting the policy. So it all looks fine. Just bear in mind this might be the sort of the last time we update the policy for a little while. Understandably, that is resource intensive. I'm assuming that this policy caters for newer electric vehicles, low emission vehicles, and that there's going to be no issues in the future if there is a transition to those in the next few years of taxi carriages and things.
Yes, at the moment we're quite conscious of the fact that traditionally North Somerset Fleet have had very elderly vehicles, mostly diesel Ford Mondeos for some reason. And I think that's probably just the demographic as it's evolved. We're already in conversation with the sustainability colleagues to see if there's any sort of promotions and incentives that we can get for drivers to convert to electric vehicles. We know they're very expensive.
Yes.
We will also see if there's any subsidies that we can try and assist with licence fees to try and promote the use of electric vehicles or hybrids at least as we go forward. We're conscious that we've only got sort of 2 policy reviews before 2030. And at that point, we will have to change it radically to say what kind of emissions and fuel types and vehicles we will actually accept. So we accept that's a staged approach. But at the moment, we're also, I'll come on to it later with the staffing, but we've got a taxi compliance officer in post now. So what I propose to do is some really robust data gathering around the number of those older vehicles that fail emissions test on first time, ones that fail when we do them as a compliance, and encourage those drivers by suspension, by whatever means we need to get them up to a standard that's then going to carry us forward with climate change in mind.
Thank you. I mean, I appreciate electric vehicles are expensive. I just didn't want our policy to hinder it in any way. And absolutely, if it can help the transition, great. Thank you, Sue.
The next question is from Councillor Cherry. Caroline.
Thank you very much. And it's amazing how much you've put into this new policy. It looks great. It was just a little question I had. It was about in section 510, you ask for there to be tests by North Somerset of the drivers of both their oral and written skills in English. And although I wonder, because you then say that you need the oral, I understand that because of the questions about their being able to pick up connections on county lines. But is it too big a requirement, both oral and written English? And is that right? And who would be carrying out the test?
We're just trialling them at the moment online.
Yeah.
What we've done is take some nationally approved English standard testing. So it's a bit difficult to describe, but you can take the test online. And the reason that it's written, reading and oral is you're doing an online test monitored by someone watching you on camera, very similar to a Teams. It's a one-on-one Teams at the moment. They're sent a link. They will go into the application. It requires them to actually read what the questions are, even though they're multiple choice. There are some that have audio listening clips as well. So they are devised statements of a certain, I don't know how they devise what those statements should be, but they do require you to then interpret what you've just heard to answer a basic question. And then there will be some basic answer questions, like a thing that we wouldn't ask them to do anything more elaborate than issue a receipt for a customer, but they should be able to then put name details and address detail and amount on a receipt, be able to fill in their own application forms and to understand what they're signing in that respect. So it's not an in-depth English test, as you would say, like a GCSE, but the standard is nationally recognised to be suitable for use in everyday English language use. I don't know if that answers the question, really.
That's far better. No, I just thought this sounded so elaborate. And the only other thing I was really worried about, but I think it might be happening across the country because of the government's policies, are these ideas that you're going to ask drivers to provide certificate of good character from overseas, and I imagine that that's going to be fairly tricky for substantial numbers. And I don't know whether that and the English test might be seen as discriminatory, but I'm just wondering, it does seem like a sledgehammer. I just hope that's what I'm slightly concerned about.
No, I appreciate that, and I think the tests are not sought to exclude people that don't have English as a first language. They are set to be of a public safety level, so that if you have a vulnerable passenger who is unable to communicate particularly well, we would expect a driver to have enough working knowledge of the language of the majority of their customers to be able to converse. It's a nationally accepted standard, which I agree may well look like sledgehammer. As far as the certificates of good conduct are concerned, because we are aware that we don't want to preclude people from overseas that come here and want to work as taxi drivers, we also still need to verify their background. And the only way to do that, because we can't do a DBS if they've not been resident in the country for very long, is to get the equivalent from their home country. So I think that's why it's been nationally accepted that you have to go back to the point of residence at the last known residence to be able to get those certificates of good conduct, just to ensure that there isn't anything in the background that we would not want them to drive with.
Okay, thank you.
Next up is Councillor Anne Harley.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to comment on the question about the electric transport, just to comment on that first of all, I think when we are looking at it, I think we definitely have to take into consideration that all of us who've got these present cars, there's not going to be any value in them. You can't sell them on. So, I mean, when we go electric, so we've got to be taking that into consideration as well, because that's going to be very costly without the purchase of the electric cars. My comment actually on it is, and I do apologise because I'm getting phone calls all the time. My husband's actually in hospital at the moment, but my comment really is about the safeguarding of children and vulnerable persons. You know, we're all very well aware of that, and the only and that is a part of the policy that I think has got to be extremely robust, which I think we're doing our best on it. But the fact is that looking at the next point that we're going to be discussing is the operators have the control and they have to keep identifications, etc., and they've got to have training. Now, are we robust on that training? Are we robust on checking these operators? And are we robust in making sure that they are, as I say, trained, but also that they're actually going by the right name? Because anybody could come in and probably have a false name. Are we actually robust on all of that?
Couple of points in that. We will be requiring the operators themselves and the dispatch and booking staff to undergo the safeguarding awareness session. Jeff, my new taxi compliance officer, who's now in post, 30 years police officer, a lot of background in safeguarding training for the police. He is delivering those sessions himself. They're just about an hour and a half, and they're really quite involved in what the training actually involves. I would invite all of you to come. I'll circulate some dates for you because they're online at the moment, and it would be quite useful for you to probably sort of sit in on one of those and just see the training that's being delivered. So I would say that we're quite robust on the areas that are being covered there. As far as record keeping, we've got a normal schedule of operator inspections, which have had to go a bit on the back burner when we've been in lockdown and we haven't been able to physically do them. But Jeff and the other officers will be doing regular operator visits now the restrictions are lifted, and we'll be checking that the new schedule of record keeping that they will be required to do is actually robust, and we can dip test that and question them a little bit further. I mean, obviously, there's no way that they can always check every person that gives them the information, but as long as they're doing some sort of best endeavours on that front, then we will be dip testing those. We're also involved in an operation at the moment, which I won't sort of go into in too much detail in a public forum, but one of the police teams in Bristol is doing some very specific and focused work with operator testing at the moment, where they are doing some test purchases as such to make sure that those operators are actually following the instruction, are trained and are following it through with the drivers as well. So that will be happening in the next sort of 3 to 5 months, and that will be quite local as well as national. So I will feed back to you as soon as that operation has happened. But yeah, there's plenty going on in that area as well with police intervention and joint agency work that we're confident we're not going to get to everything, but we will do our best on that front.
And thank you for that. And Chairman, just a quick follow up. I mean, I remember at one time we used to have, contacts with other authorities if we were concerned about anything, and people, with the police, etc., etc. And that's where I think you get a lot of feedback. So I'm assuming that is a part of it, working in partnership with them.
Yeah, we've still got some local police groups that we're part of. We still have our responsible authorities group where we share with different agencies. And we've also got a regional licensing liaison group. So that covers everywhere from sort of South Gloss down to sort of Minehead, Yeovil. And all the teams join together quite regularly just to feedback what's on the patch and what's an issue and cross-border.
Thank you. And Chairman, can I just ask you a question, if I may? Some of these things that Sue is talking about would be most helpful, I think, for all of us to know. Is there any way that we can set up sometime a sort of group, not a group, but, sort of a virtual meeting where we can actually hear exactly who, the actual map of it, who you're actually dealing with, so that we know, because then we will know as councillors, because all of these change. Is it possible to do that, Chairman?
Yeah, I'm happy for something like that to be set up, yeah.
Thank you.
Is that,
yeah.
Yeah.
That's fine. I'm quite happy to accommodate that. We can do it as an informal discussion group, just so that there's anything that you want to feed into us or feedback, rather than in a formal setting like we're doing now.
Okay, thank you. Right, the next is Councillor Mike Solomon.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I wanted to touch on the point of convictions and the policy we're taking there. I was at a panel where we interviewed a prospective driver, I think Andy was as well, who had some convictions. And on paper, you would have felt you would have been reluctant to grant that man a license. But after delving into those things and speaking in very frank detail, we found that the person was quite genuine, and we did award him a license. So although I do agree with you, we have to take a fairly hard line on convictions. Sometimes if you actually interview a person, you can explain those convictions and possibly give that person a second chance. But I know it's a difficult one, Sue.
No, I appreciate that. And I think what we always will bear in mind with all our policies is that it's each case on its own merit basis. We can deviate from the policy. The policy is there as guidance. We can't go outside the legislation, of course, but if there is a reason to depart from policy, I'm sure Sarah would perhaps be able to comment a little bit more on the legal position with that. But from our point of view, we would refer anything to you that we thought may be an instant where we may wish to depart from policy, perhaps.
Yeah, I have no comments on that. I think as we try and balance every case on its own.
Sorry, Chairman, no sound.
Sorry.
I can hear nothing.
I think we try and balance every case on its own merits. Councillor Solomon, I mean, your case in point, the applicant did present as a very trustworthy person, but we still have to balance that with your perception of public safety and what Sue was saying earlier. You as panel members have a very important job to whether consider your relatives would be safe, someone you care about and safe for the fit and proper test. Leading on from that, Sue, I just had a question, a very quick question, that I see that you're putting the police disclosure point in. We've had this, I think, twice. haven't we? And what this is at the bottom of the DBS or any report you may get is maybe a comment from the Chief Constable or whatever regarding this applicant. How much weight should panel members take this as opposed to actual convictions? Maybe you could just explain a bit more what the Chief Constable would actually put as a comment.
Yeah, it's difficult to say what weight should be put on that, but bearing in mind that this is a civil process and not a criminal process, there may be instances where a driver has repeatedly been pulled over for soliciting, or there have been suggestions that haven't been upheld even as far as a caution, that there may have been inappropriate approaches to a passenger or inappropriate friendships made that's developed. Those are the kind of things that we've had brought to our attention before. Now, those might not have resulted in formal convictions or cautions for sexual offences or any of the other things that might bring to light. But for us, that would raise serious concerns as to the fit and proper status of someone. They may well be able to have a job where they are in a room full of people and they are not alone in a vehicle with a vulnerable other. We're not preventing them from employment. What we're saying is, on the balance of probability, do we want that person to be exposed on a one-to-one basis with people in a vehicle? And that may well carry as much weight as a caution or conviction. So we can take into account other factors, not just their criminal convictions. Is that what you meant, Sarah?
Yes, I did, because as I say, we've had this twice, and I know questions from the panel as to how much weight to apply to this. But I think the key point is, if the Chief Constable of the local police authority felt that merits a comment on the person's DBS, then even though there's not convictions, I think it should be taken very seriously and quite a high weight applied. Thank you. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Pepperell, please.
I was just asking for a reminder of, you may have covered it earlier, but I had to go and take a phone call. Is it every year that the taxi drivers come up to be relicensed?
At the moment, the licence runs for 3 years. At the moment, they are fully enhanced DBS checking at that renewal point or at new application, whichever comes first. But what we're looking to do as part of this policy is they will still have a licence that runs for 3 years, but they will have an up-to-date DBS check every 6 months throughout that 3-year period.
Thank you.
And Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Chair. This goes back to something that was being referred to a moment ago. I just want to clarify, Sue, page 70, the drink driving and the driving under the influence of drugs. So that sentence you've added at the end of 13.13 and point 16. No further applications will be entertained from anyone who has previously had a licence revoked. Now, I had to read that a couple of times before, and in context with the paragraphs before it. So if an applicant has had a previous conviction whilst not having a licence, the assumption is that we're giving them an opportunity to make amends, make whatever, and then you've got the 7 years where they've been driving sensibly, and then we will possibly entertain giving them a licence. But if they've had a licence revoked, sorry, I don't know if I'm making myself clear. If they've had a licence revoked because of drink driving or any other motor convictions on the previous page, major motoring offences, minor motoring offences, there's a certain time period for them to make amends as such. So we're assuming that they are going to be better drivers, and therefore they can have, they can apply for a licence at least. We can, consider them for a licence. But if they do anything whilst they have a licence, the assumption is that that's it. They're, It's sort of one strike and you're out kind of thing. Can I just clarify that that is the case? I'm assuming Sue's disappeared because she's looking at the looking at the item in question.
Sue, are you there?
Did I say something wrong?
Kaz, are you able to answer for Sue? You're on mute at the moment.
Yes, I see Kaz talking, yes.
So, Kaz, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can, thank you, yes.
Good. So, yeah, Sue's actually just sent me a message. Can I apologise? Her Teams is completely frozen, so she's had to restart start this. I think with regards to drivers' licences being revoked, and Sue will probably come back in on this in a moment. I think if this is a licence that we issue, the council issues, I think, on there. It's not their DVLA driving licence.
Sorry, no,
Yeah,
that's not what I meant. I meant
it's
the licence that they've been, that they've been given or they're applied for. Yeah.
Yeah, if in the new policy there, if their licence has ever been revoked, then we would not entertain accepting another application from them again at the authority. So at the moment, they can reapply after that 7-year period. Oh, here she comes.
No, yeah. So I mean, so if they've had a major motoring offence, for example, it says within the last 5 years should merit refusal, no further application until 5 years is free from conviction has elapsed. That's making the assumption that the 5 years has proven that they are a fit and worthy driver, sort of thing, or the 7 years from any drink driving or driving under the influence. The 7 years without any convictions proves that they're a fit and worthy driver, and therefore we can. But the assumption is that if they do something that would merit a conviction whilst they have a license, then that means no more. Yeah.
Sorry, apologies for my diving out there. My Teams crashed, so apologies. I'm back now. Yeah, to come back on that one, what we're saying is, if during the lifetime of a licence, someone is convicted of a serious motoring drugs offence that would warrant a revocation of that driving licence with us, then we wouldn't entertain a new application from them following revocation, no matter how long it is. They would be put on the National Revocation Database, and that's it, as far as we're concerned. If it was serious enough to revoke, if they've had a conviction previously, but for the last 5 years they've been conviction free, and at that time when they apply they've got that track record for us to go on, then we would entertain an application. I know I missed the conversation, but was that sort of roughly where we were at?
That's what it is. As I say, it was the I read the paragraphs and then I read that sentence underneath, and the no further applications will be entertained from anyone who has previously had a licence revoked. And I had to go back over to the previous paragraphs just to sort of get it clear in my mind before I thought, is that what they meant? I'm fairly certain it's what they meant, but just to make it clear.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm happy to reword those two just to indicate that if they are revoked whilst holding a licence with us, then no further applications will be entertained. I'm happy to reword that for clarity.
Unless it's only me that unless anybody else.
You won't be the only person, I'm sure, in that case.
Thank you.
I think, yeah, I agree. I think there could be improved with a slight tweak there. Yeah.
No problem.
Okay, I think I've covered all of the speakers now.
Chair, sorry, could I
yes?
ask one more question, one more supplementary question?
Go on then.
Right at the beginning, when it talks about councillor training, sorry, Sue, I don't know if you've covered this already. I got distracted by my daughter who's still at home. The councillor training, I can't find the page now, talks about natural justice. And I know what natural justice means, but I don't know what it means in this context. As a minimum, there you go. Page 4, or page 10 of the entire document. All individual, as a minimum, training for a member of the licensing committee will include licensing procedures. Well, that stands to reason. Natural justice. What does it mean in this context? Because when we had our training at the 2 years ago, I don't remember that part.
Sarah may be able to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that probably refers to the right to fair hearing and hearing all parties and giving access and openness and fairness, and a form of natural justice in that respect is what I would take from it. Sarah, you might want to help me out there.
Absolutely, yeah, nailed it. So the natural justice aspect would be that if you felt, the licensing officers felt that further investigation into an applicant's previous history was merited, then a committee, which is a form of tribunal, if you like, affords that applicant to speak to you and to explain his history, any previous convictions, and for you to make the judgment whether he's a fit and proper person. And that giving her the opportunity to put forward his case as to why he is a fit and proper person is the natural justice. And you're the best people, you've been trained to make that judgment if he's a fit and proper person. It's allowing him, and of course they are entitled to have any representation or friends to help them, so it's allowing that process to take place. That's all it means. You're not a court of law, and as Sue said, the standard that you have is on the balance of probabilities, but it's a fair and impartial hearing.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, I think that covers all the speakers. Is that right, Michelle? Is there any others?
No others, Chairman.
Okay, so do we need to approve the changes to the taxi policy?
I would be grateful. I did refer to it in the options as a note to them, but I think really what I'm trying to ask is that you accept those changes as an interim revision to the policy until a full review.
Okay, well I'll propose from the chair that we accept those changes. Thank you, James.
I'll second.
Thank you, James. So I'll take the vote on that in reverse en bloc. So is anybody against that?
No.
No. Is there anybody abstaining? No. So I'll take it that everybody is in favour of that. Thank you very much. So the last item on the agenda is urgent business, of which there is none. So therefore I declare the meeting closed.
But we've got another.